So with that being said, news in the news. So this week so far, I was looking at the Hacker News and saw a load of ransomware popping off everywhere. And I'm not really sure, if anybody's followed that or not, but there seems to be a lot of old ransomware popping up, as well as some new stuff and a lot of Android stuff. It's funny because we did a video on Android malware and APKs, like I think it was like almost a month ago. And now really people are starting to really throw Android malware out there, which is kind of scary because most people use Android now because they've left iPhone. Um, Other than that, I don't have a whole lot on this side besides, thanks for everybody's support and building this back up. So, Chee, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and kind of your history and how we met, and we'll go from there.
Wow. Okay. So how far back do I go?
As far as you want, buddy.
So yeah, my name's Chee. I'm a lecturer at the University of Westminster. Currently teaching on the network security course for undergraduate, and also on the master's degree for computer forensics. Yeah. So how I got to meet Mike was that there was an event on at the university. It was Hackers on Tour. I think that was the first time I met you. And after that, it was at a DEF CON meeting in the basement where we shared a drink. And yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, we're glad to have you on. So tell me how you got involved with cybersecurity and kind of your journey, where it started, were you interested in this as a kid or, computers, or how did it all start for you?
Yeah, so first started off with gaming. My first computer was a Commodore 64. Started programming BASIC from there. And then it was like Commodore 128 and then Amiga. So I was in the Commodore camp, whilst the others were in Spectrum and Atari. Mm-hmm. And then I went to study computer science in uni. And that's where I discovered security. I realized, we'll be programming late through the night, me and my classmates. And I realized, hey, I can look into the terminal from where I am. Right. And then, because I knew what they were running, and then it was like almost like the night before, the course of deadlines. And so we wind each other up, we'll go around killing their processes and watching them go absolutely nuts. So that, it's a bit of mischief there. Didn't do anything too bad. And just realized, wow, we can just remotely log into a device, kill processes, move their windows around, and that's how it first started. And then suddenly realized, oh, mail server, wonder what we can do from there. And then found out about the SMTP protocol, and then you could totally fabricate an email, and not leave any trace. So that's how it started off. After I graduated, continued, learning and finding out things. Sometimes I'd be sitting in Borders, reading the 2600 magazine, and that's how it all went from there.
Yeah, so I was talking to some people from Westminster, and the commonality between everybody I've spoken with is that you're like the most interesting, the most on point lecturer at Westminster. And I have to agree, like just talking to you at the couple meetings we had and going to the alumni meeting, like, I can see your passion for it. And, I know how you run your class and it's just really amazing. Kristen, what do you have for me? As a matter of fact, Kristen, why don't you introduce yourself because nobody knows you yet. So go ahead and put that out there and talk to Chee.
Cool. So I'm Kristen. I'm kind of the baby InfoSec person of the group. I'm pretty new to IT. I actually was a professional skydiving instructor for under a decade and then decided to make a career change, and here I am. So I'm kind of just here to learn from everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. So one thing that I like to focus on during this podcast is, advice to young people, right? Because we have a ton of new people that have not gotten really deep into cybersecurity and not really, got their feet wet. So I know you work with a lot of students. And so what is your what's your advice to students coming into cybersecurity?
So mine would be to set up your own lab at home. You know, now it's actually very easy. When I first did it, we didn't have virtual machines.
Mhm.
Had to physically get a hold of several computers, and my whole bedroom's like a lab. And at the time, it was like caused a few issues. There were more computers in my room than there were in the home, than there were people in the home, and that's the best way to learn. And you know, when you're doing it on your own network, is very safe. You're not going to get into any form of trouble. And yeah, you know that now you have virtual machines. You can do it really easily. You know, just run several of them together, and you could, and that's the quickest way to learn.
Yeah, and I've seen the lab at Westminster University, and it's pretty massive. And then talk to Iman and talking about how they run their lab and you know, different stuff like that. It's pretty interesting. I was really impressed when I went to Westminster University for the talk, and then I eventually lived like I think 2 blocks away from there, over close to Oxford Circus. But was always making trips over there. You know, got a lot of friends there. You know, it's a great place to be. Met a lot of really cool people. So the night that I went to Westminster for the Inside the Mind of a Hacker, I actually that's where I met the London Met Police for the first time. So Westminster holds like a special place for me because that's kind of where everything spun off from. It got really big. And we stayed in touch, and I've always respected, you know, your teaching style and stuff. So what are you working on now? What are you working with the students on as far as like, you know, your class?
Yeah. So one of the things is that in addition to technical skills is like communication as well, and also things like entrepreneurialism,
Mhm.
bringing, you know, because the students are building up lots of skills along the way, and there's so many different areas they can go into, things like the kind of like penetration testing side, vulnerability assessments, some to do with more management, or kind of like security analyst. And so it's and we're building up a network at the university community whereby everyone supports one another to create something. And um, is how can they bring what they know, what they've learned to the community. And so there's at the moment I'm focusing a lot on the community building, and you know, that's how I invited you to the talk. You know, so we have some former students here on the call, whereby we invite, you know, former graduates back to kind of like share what they're learning, what they're developing in their organizations, and how they're bringing it out to the world, but also supporting one another's growth in the industry. Yeah, so it gives people a chance to, you know, kind of see, oh, right, this is someone who's not just that plucked out from the industry. This is someone who's actually developed from the courses that we've run, and they've made something for themselves. And a lot of people are looking for guidance, you know, on how to develop, where to, what step to take next. And so that's what I've been focusing on these last few years.
I think that's really important because, especially like now, right in the industry, we talked about this last podcast. There seems to be a lot of openings for people with experience, but not a whole lot for people coming out of uni. And that to me is bothersome because that tells me that people are not promoting from within. They're hiring people for those positions, and the people who are, you know, newcomers, they're not giving them a chance to move up. So that's kind of why we put this community together, is to kind of share information. And you know, it may not be able to go onto a resume as experience, but you know, at least they'll learn something and can walk into an interview with some sort of knowledge of how exploits work, or different techniques of defending against different exploits. So that, I mean, that's one thing that I learned with doing talks for the university in the London Police, is that that's my way of giving back. And those are 2 people I don't charge for speaking engagements, is law enforcement and academia, because I think it's really important to pass it on to both of them. So Kristen, you're in school, right? You're taking classes, taking certifications. So what's your experience so far with, the way things are going with academia?
In terms of, what do you mean, I guess?
Like, just your experience, what it's like for you, and maybe some questions for Chee as far as a future and projected path or whatever.
Man, there's a lot of ways to go with this. It's been interesting. I've found IT to be a difficult field to break into, even for entry level roles. Like when I was in Alabama, even for like basic help desk or even internships, I offered to work for free at a few places. And they were like, "No, you don't have any experience. Come back when you do." I'm like, "Well, okay." um, I see a lot in the news about the cybersecurity skills gap or the cybersecurity shortage.
Mhm.
And I guess my question for you guys is, do you guys think that that's a thing? And if so, how can we fix it? Or how can we better prepare students to enter the field? What should we be doing?
I'll let Chee take that.
On our course, we give them the choice, right? From our courses, some people have gone into penetration testing, some have gone into to become security analysts, and I know all the students really well. I have them for at least 2 years, and I find out what do they want to, where do they want to take it. So they have a natural curiosity for security, seeing how things work, and my job is to, kind of like help nurture it, and then take it in a direction that they want to take it, not where I think they should be going. Is if they have an ambition to go into penetration testing, I'm like, okay, so these are the kind of things you look into, these certifications, these kind of tools. If they're more into security analyst, then I say, right, okay, start researching into this, developing that, and start going into vulnerability assessments instead, and look at some of the ISO 27000 stuff. And so it's depending on what they want. So my job isn't to tell them that to go here or that. It's let them take charge of their own destiny as such.
Ryan, go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
Hey, so with like how fast technology moves, how does the university curriculum stay up to date with what's happening? Like 2 years is a pretty solid investment, and I'm noticing a swing towards certifications rather than degrees. Mm-hmm. Like, how does Westminster keep up with the emerging technologies?
Yeah, so we update our courses every about 3 years. We go through validation with the British Computer Society and also with IET as well. And so every time we refresh the course, we look at what's the landscape. There are some fundamental things which are going to be always the same in security, things like protocols, how do they work, file systems, what they like. And so whenever I set an assignment, I look at what is the landscape or at this current time. So just recently I set an assignment which was on remote working. How do you secure remote working? What are the challenges to organizations? And the last year it was cloud security, and then year before it was remote access Trojans, and so I tailor the assignments to really current challenges. And then whenever we give an examples in class, we cover the fundamentals, and then we give a very current example of an attack or something based on that or on the principles.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it's funny because I did a talk for BCS early January, BCS Hertfordshire. It was the exact same thing, working from home. So yeah, it seems like it's a hot topic. And so at the university, the students are still working remotely, or are they back in the building?
Yeah, so we've been remotely teaching since March last year.
Wow.
And it looks like this semester is going to be the same thing as well. So luckily, university provides workstations if they need it, so that they can work from home. And then any form of, so they just download an image of Kali Linux or something, and they're given a whole set of exercises to follow. and yeah, we can still carry on. We can still maintain the same kind of experience. So whenever they're having any challenges with kind of like what's going on and how to do something, I can share the desktop or remote into theirs and then fix something. So the experience is as best as we can do at this moment in time.
So do you guys experience any kind of security risk? Have you seen any kind of attacks against university as far as that type of remote instruction or availability?
Yeah. Because I'm not aware of the attacks, we have a security team for that. Because I'm on the teaching side, I don't get to see it. We have had some denial of service attacks against kind of like the network, which is used by universities. That was towards, I think that was last year at some point. There's a guy on here who knows more than I do, Chuck, because he was on the team at one point. And yeah, so we've been running without glitches. If anything, it was just teething problems with kind of like getting people into a classroom, a virtual classroom. Because we don't use Zoom or Teams, we use kind of like a package called Blackboard.
Mm-hmm.
All the participants are managed and they belong to university, so they can't share a link with someone, so we don't have any kind of like bombing, classroom bombing or anything like that.
Right, that's cool. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of issues with Zoom if you don't really lock it down, with people bombing Zoom meetings and Twitch and stuff like that. So I'm going to ask all three of you guys a question. So when you look at your most passionate piece of security that you want to go after and that you would focus your research time, what would it be and why? Chee, go ahead.
My one would be for mobile phones. Mobile phones, because now it's used for out of band authentication and so on, text messages, and even if people don't use a computer a lot, they'll be using a phone. And just reading about some of the ways in which memory is managed and which encryption keys are left around, after you first unlock as well, to how things persist in memory and, and techniques on how to grab things like keys, which the developer didn't expect, but because of the way that the environment managed it, left some vulnerabilities. So I would direct it towards phones.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Ryan?
I guess mine at the moment is probably IoT, Internet of Things. It's kind of just the massive threat that it kind of presents, like with like hard-coded firmware and all this sorts of hard-coded passwords and things like that. That's kind of what's my focus at the moment, just because I don't know that much about it, and just getting into what the possibilities are, the possibilities for defending that, the possibilities maybe even of using those things as an offensive thing in a defensive manner. So that's what's exciting me.
And Kristen, what's your passion right now as far as security goes?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one because I feel like every time I learn about something new, I think it's the coolest thing ever. So that's been my problem, is it's hard for me to focus. I got really into reverse engineering through mostly capture the flag challenges. I suck at it, so I'm not any good, but I think it's really cool. In learning how to do that, I think I discovered more foundational things that I needed to take a step back and focus on, just things like operating system architecture and stuff like that I didn't really get in my degree program. Yeah, other than that, I think like the social engineering aspect of cybersecurity is fascinating to me. I didn't even really consider it as a part of security. And then when I started studying, I'm like, oh man, I did a lot of stuff like that as a base jumper. So that physical side of penetration testing, that also is super interesting and really applicable to some of the stuff I already know.
Yeah, I like to do like the lock picking and some of the physical stuff. Social engineering is probably one of the most effective ways to infiltrate a network, no matter how hard that network is or who's guarding the door. Social engineering is usually the way in, whether it be through email or, direct contact, or just, be able to build a profile on that person. So yeah, like social engineering is really important. So if people are getting into cybersecurity and they're looking for the more offensive side, like pen testing, that's where I would start, because you can be taught the technical stuff, but the mindset and psychology is a little different than the blue side. So yeah, that's where I'm at as far as that.
Hey,
So,
Chee,
go ahead.
question for Chee. So do you cover social engineering in the degree program at Westminster?
We don't. It's not in the curriculum, but I do dedicate some classes on kind of like psychology and manipulation, and yeah. So, but we don't test on it. But we do cover some aspects, and I do kind of like share some videos of how people can be manipulated into disclosing things like passwords unwittingly. It could take place in a bar. Someone comes up to you, befriends you, and they're willing to play a long game. And I make people aware of that.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because at the university, when I went there to speak, it was kind of getting towards like after hours, and the security guards at the front desk were kind of in their own little world. And I just said, "Hey, I need in. I forgot my badge," and they just opened up the gates, and I was like, "Oh wow, where'd I go here?" But that seems to be pretty prevalent with any business or organization, is that the people you have guarding the door don't necessarily have security in mind. They're fulfilling a job and making a paycheck, and they're not used to people trying to infiltrate their business. So I ran into that a lot doing pen testing. But then we got into locks, electronic locks, and other things, and that's become kind of like my bad habit. Is when I'm sitting around, I'm really bored, I'll sit there and crack a lock. So there's a lot of there's tons of different avenues people can go when they go into uni. Where do you see most of your students heading as far as like offensive or defensive?
We've got some members on here. I think it's more towards the defensive and security analyst side. We do have pen testers, but they seem to be in the minority. The most of them are to do with setting policies, kind of like blue team kind of stuff. Yeah. But penetration testers, there have been a few, and then some of them are like really good at it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Are there any programs in place in the UK that are for people coming out of university to get into the industry? Are there any? Does the government provide any programs, or are there any private sector programs that you know
of? So I haven't been involved in any of those initiatives. From the community that I built in our university, when some of the former students come back, they actually come with job openings. And so I always tell the students, yeah, some of these people are going to come back with vacancies. Prepare your CVs, get to know them, because they've come through our system. They know what we teach. They know how we teach it. They know what skill set they're going to have, and they can help bridge the gap much easier. So that's one of the reasons why I created the community, so that we don't depend on an external organization, that we can do it all in-house.
Yeah. So I know Kristen's done her homework on this episode. So Kristen, why don't you unload with your questions? I know you have a ton.
Oh gosh. So teaching is obviously a huge part of your life as an educator. I was hoping you could share some stories about some of your most inspirational students.
Wow. Okay, I won't give any names for privacy reasons. Yeah, we had one guy who was kind of like a bit more of a mature student. He came through, and because he wanted to make a better life for himself. And so he studied really hard, got really good grades, and then he decided to go for the cybersecurity challenge, the UK one. And he asked, what does he need to prepare? And I thought, right, okay. And I knew it was serious, and I knew that he had the ability, so I gave him a whole load of extra homework to do. And he continued through. He got through a number of rounds, and he actually was in the winning team from there. And then he had some job offers, and this was probably the only time I gave advice where, I asked him to, do this, right?
Yeah.
So he had a job offer. It was a good job offer for a new graduate. And there was this kind of graduate scheme, which was unpaid at a large firm. And then he said, Chee, this company's, offering, I think it was about £36,000 or something, which is good for a graduate. And then, this is a graduate program and it's 6 months and there's none paid. And I said, graduate program. He said, you sure? Graduate program, right? So, but he took the advice and he went on it. And then later, they kind of like extended the graduate program. It's like from 6 months, they said, gee, they're about to extend it. I'm not going to be paid and stuff like that. I said, well, if they wanted to get rid of you, they would have.
Right.
Just stick with it. And he carried on. And then within 2 months, they gave him a full contract. And then it became a international security consultant. Then they sent him off to do his master's degree. And then he went to work for really large investment banks, pen testing. They paid for all of his courses. And that was really inspirational. There was one other student that I taught a number of years ago. I first started teaching him programming and then computer science. And then he went into cybersecurity, and then I think it was about 2 years ago, he was UK Cybersecurity Consultant of the Year.
Wow. Nice.
And now he's got a MBE, so he just recently got that. So works in a defense company, and yeah. So these are really inspirational students. We've got some other students as well. One of them, who I won't name, left the military and then pursued a degree. Very different environment. In the military, everything's very strict and so on, and then more in an unstructured environment. That was a challenge, and then now he's working for a really great organization in security as well. So there's a number of people on this call today who have done great things.
So the UK challenge, you're referring to the Matrix challenge, right?
It's the cybersecurity challenge. It's called it. It's previously run by GCHQ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the
so we've done pretty well in that. We've had one person on the winning team and one on a runner-up as well.
That's really cool. So that's a big challenge. That's all of the UK. GCHQ does it, as well as the London police have their own called the Matrix Challenge. I don't know if everybody knows about that, but it's also another national competition, CTF style. Their award ceremony, I think, is next month. So Kristen, what else you got?
Do you have a particular subject you enjoy teaching, or what do you really like to nerd out on?
Oh, yeah. It's no, there's different phases. So there's one phase where I really love things like network-based attacks. And then it went towards application-based, and then now it's kind of like file systems, kind of like hiding things in there. But then whenever I teach, I always want to know, how does it work? Because the problem is always in the fundamentals. You find out how something works, and then it's used in a way that the designer didn't expect. And that's how these vulnerabilities, because someone creates a piece of software or some kind of function, and they just think of functionality, and then somebody else looks at it with a bit of curiosity and goes, I wonder what happens if I do this, and then they create something. So it's just looking into that. But what I like about it, security, is just how creative it is.
Yeah, that's absolutely
it's very
true.
Highly creative skill. We take the narrative out of it, good, bad, and stuff like that, and we just look at it, what it is. It's an art form. And so whenever I teach my students, I always tell them, this isn't a subject that you're studying. This isn't part of the conveyor belt. You study a subject, you get a job and stuff like that. No, this is an art.
Right.
that you're going to immerse yourself in. And if you go all in, you're going to get results.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more. I always tell people that it's more than just a technical ability. It's the ability to orchestrate and to envision and be creative. If you can't be creative, especially on the red team, if you can't be creative on the offensive side, you're going to fall very short. So we have to find ways on the fly to like keep painting that picture and manipulating the scenery to get where we want to go. I totally dig that comment. So as far as your path, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Are you still going to be teaching, or are you going to be doing your own research, or what?
I have kind of like been getting into things like blockchain technology, decentralized finance at the moment. So that's where my attention is. I'm looking into it and then, watching it develop. And there's lots of exciting things going on in that side. So for me, it's, it's not so much, 5 years I want to do this, 10 years I want to do that. Right. It's, what feels true at that moment in time to give my attention to.
Absolutely.
So over the last few years, it's been developing the community at the university, and then now it's who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a big world, and especially with the ever changing like threatscape of working from home and the lockdowns and all the nation state attacks. There's going to be more and more of a demand for people like us. So it's hard to predict where that's going to go. So as far as the UK goes, so I spent some time over there for a couple of years. Got to experience life over there and how things are ran, and then I come back to the Wild Wild West where things are a little bit different. One thing I respected about the UK is that their thoughts on cybercrime. A lot of people know that a lot of us come from different backgrounds, but over there they like to give people a second chance. And actually, the intervention workshop that I did, the very first one, they approached me about addressing some universities to see if they would get involved in like donating equipment or whatever, because they do a miniature CTF for the kids who are like in trouble. And it's a good way to gauge their experience and their knowledge and kind of match them up with employers or prospective, places where they can go train. So are there any programs at Westminster right now that can help those kids or send some kind of focus and help that out?
We don't have any dedicated programs as such, but because I take on a very hands-on approach to teaching, I really get to know the students, what they're about, and because I, kind of like done a bit of work in personality typing, I can help them direct their attention to something which is more functional for them. I remember there was one guy. He had a very very good sense of networking knowledge and scripting and so on. And I remember this guy because he in the first lesson he actually tested me. He said, "Sir, I saw some script and I want you to tell me what it's about." So, and then he started writing on a board. I was like, "Okay, all right, so we'll go with it, and I'll entertain this." And then I went, okay, so it's a nice redirection attack, blah, blah. And then, after that, kind of got to know him. And it's like, yeah, normal person wouldn't have this kind of knowledge. And then I later found out that he ran a botnet. I'm like, okay. I'm like, yeah, it looks like that kind of thing that you'll drop in. I'm like, okay, probably best that you don't do that. So I did give him some things like, with your skills, you can actually go into this and this and that. So we give guidance. I give guidance to the students if I feel that they're going to be, if they're in a sense of threat or something like that. I say, hey, right. You can direct this somewhere, and I give them kind of like exercises that they can use to help them deal with, whatever they're going through. Because sometimes when we all go through emotional rides, and then if they get swept up in it, who knows where it's going to end up for them. So for me, that I do the intervention. If I feel that, so that's why I kind of more than just a teacher or lecturer. I'm just like, yeah, if you got any issues, just come see me. You know,
Yeah.
and some students have. You know.
Yeah, I always respect you for that because I knew some of the students and they told me how personal you were and how you really took a huge passion into what you do. And there's not a lot of teachers who do that. There's a lot of teachers who go out there and teach cybersecurity and they're doing it for a paycheck, or they're doing it because of their stature and within the community. But what I find refreshing is like I've met a couple teachers or lecturers in the UK that did it just because they had a passion for it, a passion for sharing that knowledge. That's kind of what we're about too. Like, so we started this community just to share knowledge, freedom of information. Let me teach you how to do certain things, and kind of help you decide where you want to go. So I think that's really important to give students like that creativity, give them that open space to create on their own, as well as some guidelines to get past the class. So if you were to take an offensive stance in a network, what would be your favorite place to hit and your most experience and why?
Yeah, the weakest place is always at a point of interaction with a human. I would go towards that side. I know that the kind of like the darker side of my personality would go towards there.
We all have that. We all have that. Some of us just lead into that darker personality more than others, I think. So I'm going to open it up to questions for Chee. We have one right now for Chee. It says, can you please ask Mr. Yeung to suggest us some scientific journals for cybersecurity, especially in this field? So is there anything that you read on a routine basis that maybe other people could benefit from doing like a daily or weekly read on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, for me, admittedly, I haven't been reading that many academic journals. What I do like to follow up, read upon. So for me, things like going to DEF CON meets. Mm-hmm. I watched the videos that are from the main conferences, CanSec West, Black Hat, and so on. And because there is so much, it's like you can go either low level towards the hardware side and low level programming, mm-hmm. or you can go towards kind of like infrastructure and cloud and stuff. So it's I personally don't read that many academic journals. Mm-hmm. I look at what's people are creating with actual products that are around. Yeah.
Very cool. There's another one, and Ryan asks this: benefit of university education over the certification route.
That I think that the different outcomes, from a university one, it's a structure where you're given more of a choice, and you've got time to decide which direction you want to go. So if someone is like undecided, but they think that they want a career in cybersecurity, right? Okay, so from here we'll develop your networking skills and so on. If you want to go towards network engineering, you can go that route, or security. And we have students that change their mind after the first year. They say, yeah, actually, I want to go towards this and this. Whilst if you go for a certification, yes, it is very specialized, but is that what they really want? Because quite a lot of the students have been through a number of years of the education system, and they don't know anything else other than that. So then there's a chance to actually get exposure, gain an orientation, and decide what they want to do after. It's not one or necessarily one or the other. They both have their benefits. The people going towards specialization and certification, they may not be developing skills like programming, application development, and so on. It's just a different experience. When you do certification, you're not going to do things like group work on projects. So yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with, it's all education, right? So if you do the research on your own and, go for different certifications, you're still getting some sort of education. Mm-hmm. I think university helps with kind of guiding people who don't really know which direction they want to go, but they know they want to do cybersecurity, and it helps them get launched into that career. For me, I didn't have any formal training on cybersecurity, I just kind of like researched on my own and challenged different tests and stuff. But what I find is when you do that, sometimes you put yourself in a disadvantage because you don't have that piece of paper that says, yes, I stuck with something for 6 years. And that's a disadvantage that I face. But with my background, it was more of, here, I understand you're looking for a bachelor's degree, but let me show you what I can do. And so I had to try a little bit harder to get people to step back and let me show them what I can do instead of showing them on paper. So that was a challenge at the very beginning. I think everybody getting into the field, whether they're school taught or certifications, I think have a tough time when it gets to launching. Just because there's so many different types of companies, there's so many different operations. I mean, there's just so much out there because cybersecurity has gotten so big. And I think it's overwhelming to a lot of people as to, which company should I pick or what operation do I want to focus on? And I think with the uni that really helps with that function or that step in the progress. So what else do we have? Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Chee? Kristen, you have any more?
Yeah, I want to know, what is your favorite protocol and why?
That's my favorite one. When I designed the course at university, I decided on the content, and at the time it was lots to do with redirection attacks at the network level. DNS, ARP, all of those, and spoofing, and so those are the ones that I really like doing, because when I come to teaching it's actually pretty fun as well. Things like so those when I teach things like DNS redirection, and so I start off with a practical example. So instead of diving in straight into the protocols and digits and so on, I'd say, what if someone came up to, got your phone and then changed one of the phone numbers? Not changing the name, but changing one of the phone numbers. So, what's the impact on you? And so I set scenarios like that, get them thinking. I say, people can do that on your, using a protocol and doing it remotely. And then, it gets their attention. And so for me, it's getting the attention to get them curious about something that they can relate an attack to something that could happen to them in real life. I just ask them, what if someone was to redirect your mail? What's the impact on you? And then say, but it's actually easier to do it on a computer. And then just how a packet or two can actually redirect with traffic. Just so simple. And that's the beauty of it. It's just very simple and it has an effect.
So there's another question from Fee. She says, can you suggest any researchers' papers exploring the intersection of infotech, cybersecurity, and human psychology and/or evolution?
Wow. Okay, so that's a number of disciplines all intertwined. I don't know of any. That sounds like something that would go for a PhD thesis.
Yeah, there is one book that you can get called The Cyber Effect. So The Cyber Effect is a book written by, I want to say, a psychologist, and it covers the psychology of the internet, right? So it looks at different criminals on the internet and how they were affected by technology and how it bends kind of their thinking or whatever. But it's called The Cyber Effect, and I can't remember the author, but it's actually pretty good. So
there's one book I read before quite a while back. It was like more for the kind of like security engineer, and it's like Inside the Security Mind or something like that.
Yeah.
So that that was about the mindset of someone who's going to be in charge of security.
Right. Another one. There's a comment here. Former Chee student just wanted to say that his teaching style and everything that he taught was the best I experienced. Due to his teaching, I managed to land a role in December of 2020 during the peak of unemployment rates in the UK. So that's a pretty big pat on the back. Right. I think all of your students have sort of the same feeling. I haven't met a student of yours yet that wasn't really impressed with your teaching style.
Oh, yeah. No, it's they're giving part of their life to learning something, and whatever way I can, support them in their journey, I'll do.
Absolutely.
So Chee, what is it about your teaching style that causes such affection? Like, is it the personal interaction? Is it your depth of knowledge? Like, where does this where does this come from?
Yeah. So, when I first started teaching, I wouldn't say, I was like very traditional, tell them how something works, and then it's very prescriptive. And then as I developed, as a teacher, because I didn't come from I was working for a number of years before I went to teaching. I didn't study and get my master's degree and then go into teaching. That I was working, and then I was like, right, okay. It can be a very unfulfilling experience, like learning, and without curiosity. So I was like, right, how can I create an environment where learning happens, where the curiosity happens? And so the first part is, not to make it shameful or make someone feel inadequate if they get it wrong. So the first part is like, make it okay to explore something,
right?
Without feeling self-conscious about getting something incorrect, right? And so it's creating that kind of environment where I don't say what's right and wrong. I was like, okay, so you propose this, let's explore it. And so through a process of exploration, understanding happens and learning happens. So I don't necessarily tell them that this is the way. I'm like, okay, what if we did it this way? And then sometimes on purpose, I would actually put an incorrect answer and go with an incorrect answer and say, why didn't you guys stop me? Right? And they're like, yeah, but we wanted to, but your teacher said, no, you have to challenge this.
Right.
And so it's creating an environment whereby I'm not some kind of superior person there. I'm just like, yeah, I know learning can be tough. It can be uncomfortable, but, it's just holding them there through it, that it's going to be okay, that they develop through it and so on. Yeah.
So that curiosity.
It's not so much about getting something right or wrong. It's just, right, let's go on a journey.
Right. Exactly.
That curiosity that you're talking about, do you think that can be created, or is it something someone's born with? Like, I know that curiosity, everyone in this podcast right now has that curiosity. They're here. Is that something that can be, do you need to be born with that, or can that be learned?
We're all born with an innate sense of curiosity and wonder and awe and so on. But then it gets, the way that the school system works, it kind of like doesn't encourage it, doesn't allow it to really, really develop. So it's just trying to get that back again. And for me, I went on kind of like about 6 years ago, I just started exploring, what am I about? What is learning? What is education? Right? And so I went on a little journey of exploration, did some training courses, some coaching, and so on. And then it completely opened my mind to, a different expression. And that's how it changed. And so as I became more curious about myself and like, how do I create an environment where people learn, then I started learning as well.
Exactly.
I started finding out what was effective, what worked, what didn't work.
I find it really.
And then, me acknowledging that I'm with, another human being. It's not so much like teacher, student kind of thing. No, these are other human beings. They made a commitment to something, and just because I'm, maybe slightly ahead of the road doesn't make me any better than them or any worse. And some of these students have done many things that I haven't done before. So it's just acknowledging that we all have gifts and talents, and then going along with that.
So what's the?
Sorry,
go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
So Chee, if you were going to do a PhD, what would it be on?
What would it be on?
What excites you enough to put that investment into?
It will probably be, closer to the AI side, AI and security, security agents, autonomous ones, maybe somewhere around there.
Yeah. So what is the most challenging portion of your course to teach? What's the hardest you think is to which topic is hardest to get through to the students and why?
It'll probably be things towards the application side. With things like networking and so on, you can kind of give examples of things that happen in real life. But as soon as you get down to system level and you're dealing with bits and bytes and registers and things like buffer overflow attacks, and so that can I think of a real life example where they would have experienced this, and so where there isn't a bridge to some experience of theirs, that makes it a little bit more challenging. So we can't cover things like buffer overflows without covering data structures and how it's managed in memory, and then how things are spaced and how kind of stack and heap, and so once you get the kind of the background, then we can start layering on top. So it's covering something in layers, and sometimes setting the foundation is the thing that takes the longest.
Right.
But once they've got a good foundation, then it becomes very straightforward.
So what about shell code? Do you guys teach shell code at the uni?
Yeah, so we do some development, kind of like bash scripts and so on in the second year. For operating systems, things like memory management and so on, but not from a security perspective. It's just like, how does it work? Right. And then in my subject, we'll touch upon, go a bit further, and it's like, how does that work in this buffer overflow?
Right. Very cool. Any more questions for Chee? Kristen, do you have anything else?
Gosh, so like burnout and mental health is a really big deal in our industry. And I guess I'm wondering, have you experienced that yourself, and how do you deal with it, or what tips do you have for someone entering the field?
Yeah, it's an art that you immerse yourself in. And then at some parts, it's actually a very, as I was learning, it could be a very lonely journey, without support around you. And it could get to the point of almost like obsessive. Yeah, I would, when I was like learning all of this, staying up to 3, 4 in the morning was normal. Kind of like not engaging with, friends and stuff like that. That because I was so immersed in it, was it had an effect on others as well. And so it's really important to have an interest that you can engage in, which is totally separate from kind of like, taking responsibilities in something other than, security. So for me, I have a martial arts community as well, Kung Fu. Cool. I did something completely outrageous, things like dance or art or something like that. And all of those, because we have to develop on a number of different aspects of ourselves. Just by going in one direction, it will have a negative effect in the long run.
Yeah.
So it gives you a bit of perspective. But I remember for years I would just immerse myself, and that was the time when I actually learned the most. But it had a negative effect on other aspects of my life and others as well.
I think that's the hard part, is when you have a passion that's so deep for something that is so wide. It's really difficult to refrain from diving in head first. And I think that's what attributed to like insomnia and people stressing out. Like I always say, I can't do all this by myself, but it's me who takes it on. I'm the one up until 2, 3 in the morning trying to get shell code right, or, just diving off into another topic and rabbit holing for 4 or 5 hours. But, in the same token, it's all about balance, right? So it's okay to do that if you balance it out with something else. And I'm just now, even after 20 years, I'm just now learning that balance is important. So,
balance is really hard, I feel like.
Yeah, super hard. Super hard. So I try to take one day out of the week where I don't work on the podcast, where I don't mess with exploits and record videos, and just try to take a break and take a breath. And even then it's hard. I'll still be sitting on the couch and I have a thought hit me in the head, and I'm like, oh shit, I wonder if that works. And I spend 4 or 5 hours trying to get to work. So yeah, like, I mean, there's people who have a passion for it, and there's people who know that it's a good career field to get into, and they become professionals, and you know, they do the 9 to 5, but don't have that extra oomph. And that's easy to pick up in an interview as well. So, you know, be honest with yourself about your passion for the trade craft and for the art. You know, because there's different routes that you can go. If your passion isn't like busting code or, you know, getting knee deep and just diving into stuff, there's other avenues you can go. Don't put yourself in a position where you're over your head because you were able to grab a job and they were just looking to fill a seat. Really interview the company that you're going for and the position. And if it's something too technical, don't try to bite it off, because if it's too technical, you're going to be stressed out. Do something within your means with the opportunity to move up and the opportunity to learn something else. But be honest with yourself, with your capabilities. I think that's one of the most important things that I've told other people is look at the job. Can you do it? Can you do it today? If not, you may want to look at a different avenue. But yeah, that's what got me is that, you know, I always went for the jobs I knew that I could conquer, and I would get in there and I would try to poke and prod it, you know, where else I could go within the company and learn more. So each job was a progression for me. Let's see. But Tima says, Mr. Chee, tell us how many steps does cybersecurity has to learn from the beginning, and what are those steps? Ooh, so that's like Jacob's ladder to the stars. Like I don't even know how to even answer that myself.
How many steps?
Yeah.
How high can you count?
That there is no ceiling because there, you know, there's a lot of creativity in products, right? People creating software, platforms, architectures, and so on. That's never ending. And so in cybersecurity, you're just gonna have to be aware that you're never gonna be able to cover all your bases.
Yeah.
If you're defending a network, there are so many places that you have to look out for. Well, if you think that an attacker is going to focus a lot of energy into one thing, and you have lots of these little groups that are looking into tiny little things, and they are the amount of immersion that they're going to have is going to be greater than your one over your entire network. So it's there is no peak. Yeah, it's always going to move. As long as there's innovation, there's always it's always going to keep moving. But most important is that whilst the technology changes, a lot of the fundamental principles, the main structures of attacks, they just, you know, imposed on new technology. The things like intercepting messages, that's, you know, encryption. I make it known in class that it's just the, you know, evolution of intercepting someone's smoke signals back in the days, and the horse rider. It's an evolution of that. You know, how can you stop it? Well, you know, it's how do you make it so that if they are able to intercept something, that they can't make any sense of it?
Yeah, I think that goes back all the way to like Caesar's shift during ancient Rome, you know, and the encryption methods used back then. Yeah. Encryption and obfuscation has been around since the beginning of time. Indians used to use like smoke signals to communicate, and, you know, had the wind talkers that were Native Americans speaking their own language during, you know, the different wars. So they've always used some sort of not cybersecurity, but the same principles and methodology. But I think really the worst thing the industry ever did as far as creating titles was calling somebody an SME, a subject matter expert. Because I would refuse to take a job where they called me an expert, because I'm learning things every day. I feel like a kid in a candy store. Every time I pick up a new tool and I'm like, oh, well, I can do this now. So I don't think anybody ever becomes a true expert in knowledge in everything. I think it's always a moving journey. It's a moving target. So especially with all the technology coming out, yeah, you may be an expert today, but tomorrow when that new technology comes out, you start back at ground zero. So, you know, a lot of people think that they want to go from point A to point B, but what they don't understand is like between point A and point B is like A1 through 100 And there's so many steps and so many pieces to it that it may take you a while to get from point A to B. And I've actually had people ask me, so can you teach me what you know? And I'm like, well, do you have 20 years? Because if so, we can go. But, you know, it's not something you can just data dump and give away in like a day. And I can't only imagine like the amount of stuff that you've learned over the years for teaching. Like, I mean, you have to be able to teach pretty much every subject. I have a lot of respect for that because there's no way I could do it. People ask me to like write a course and I'm like, where do I start? Like, I'm so confused. So someone asked, what about its start point? So the start point is the idea in your head that you want to be in cybersecurity. That's the starting point. Getting to know what cybersecurity is and knowing different facets of it, offense, defense, management, and then deciding where you want to go. But as far as hacking goes, I would say that people that usually fall into the red team have some sort of character trait or some sort of, I don't know, reasoning or logic that some people don't have. Like we look at things from a different perspective. And I think that is kind of required in red teaming or hacking is you have to have that semi-malicious streak to be able to look at something and go, I'm going to smash that. So it takes certain people to do certain jobs. And it doesn't mean you can't be trained for it, but look where your aptitude lies. You know, look how you look at puzzles and projects and go from there. Do we have any more questions for Chee? Does the university have direct connections with some organizations to help place students in roles?
So when we first started teaching courses, we did have to have the students go and apply. You know, there are companies which you know hold fairs at the university for placements and internships. So this is one of the reasons why I set up the community at the university. Is that you know it takes several years to build up, because as people start getting into more senior positions, then they're in a position to actually take on interns or something like that. And this is still something that's building up now. Yeah.
Very cool.
So, you know, even our students, quite a few of them have come back to be mentors to some of our current students. And some of them do lead to employment, you know, at the end of it. So it's all a structure. It's still growing, and it's working for quite a lot of our students.
That's awesome. Well, so Chee, we appreciate your time. I know it's getting late over there in the UK, but you're welcome anytime in a haunted house, whenever you want. Doors open. So with that, I'm going to let you go. You can stay online with us if you want. I'm going to do a quick video demo of a tool called Fake Image Exploiter. A really simple tool. It's kind of like almost script key-ish, but it gives people an idea of how to hide PowerShell and stuff in images and other documents and whatnot. So give me a second to get that set up. And Kristen, if you have any more questions for Chee while I get that set up, go ahead.
I think I got them all. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you.
Okay, thank you for your time. Have a great evening, everyone.
All right. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my computer sound and share a screen. Maybe. All right, here we go. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Good.
Good. All right. So this tool is called Fake Image Exploiter. And so basically, I already have the PowerShell script. You can use the PowerShell script, or you can use like interpreter payload or whatever you want. But I like PowerShell, especially when it comes in Windows. And then basically all you have to have is a JPEG and an icon image. So I took the same JPEG and created an icon image to put into the package to deliver to the target. And I'll talk you through it here really quick. So there I'm getting the image, and then importing it into the tool, and I have my own icon. So I'm grabbing that icon, the ICO image, putting that in. It already has a payload selected. I'm creating the name of the package that I want to send over, cats. So it's building it right now. And it also uses wine to operate. So make sure you have wine compiled on your Linux box. Looking at the backdoor agent and icons, creating a zip or tar.gz, whatever you want to do. And then this is the host I'll be listening from, which already has my IP. It already sees it. And the port, I just use a standard Metasploit port 4444. And I chose a shell because the payload.ps1 is a PowerShell script. So now it's setting up the handler, the listener. And I used a Windows virtual image, default image. So I have that kit on the web server. And so I'm going to go to that web server, refresh a couple times, and download it. And you can see what Windows does. So refresh. This is the box I run all my exploits from, VirtualBox. So there's a cat.zip. I'm going to save it. Save it to the desktop. All right. Now we're going to go open that and check out the cute pictures of kittens. There it is. So cats.jpg, no big deal, right? And there's a cute little furry kitten, and you've just been rooted. So that gives you PowerShell access to that box. And with PowerShell, you can do a number of things. Schedule all kinds of jobs and whatnot. It's really effective. I've always liked PowerShell. A lot of my exploits I run with PowerShell, simply because it's so dynamic, and in most cases, it's very hard to not to really detect, but to stop. Because once I get into that job, or I start creating other processes, then things get bad for that user, and it's really hard to get me out. So I look at that as kind of a way to pivot and maintain persistence. So the two important things in hacking is persistence and be able to pivot from one box to another. So that's it. Unless we have any more questions for me or for Kristen or anybody else, I'm going to shut this down. Excuse the stupid question, but is that mimicking SSH? No, it's not mimicking SSH. It's not really mimicking anything. It's actually it goes out to the web server, grabs the payload.psi or PS1, which is PowerShell script, downloads it, executes it in memory, and gives me a reverse shell because I've already coded that payload to call back to that IP address like we saw in the video. So really it's giving me a PowerShell access on that local system remotely. But you can run it over SSH. You can run it over port 443. I mean, there's a number of ways you can do it. I did it through 444 simply because of the fact I was trying to get it done and have it ready for you guys. But you can do it on any port you want. So how should we stop this cat? By a dog. No, I'm kidding. Not really sure. The only way to really stop it is to make sure your antivirus is up to date. Make sure that attachments, zips, or tar.gzs are very hard to get into the network, and look for PowerShell going out on any port. So PowerShell should not be leaving that system unless it's to an admin. But what I found is a lot of companies don't actually monitor where those reverse shells go. I was actually able to sneak a PowerShell out through port 80 at a very large oil and gas company and was not stopped. So yeah, some things are very hard to detect. And like she said in his interview, is the fact that with attackers, we only have to be right one time and with one avenue. And with that, I mean, it can get really bad. But defenders have to be on their feet 24/7 and with the entire network, which is very difficult. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and I will see you guys next Saturday.